Dr. Daniel Michaels has a Ph.D. in Historical Theology from St. Louis University. He is the Chief Technology Officer at the National Institute for Newman Studies. He has deep roots in educational technology, digital humanities, software development, and executive leadership, with recent roles as President of Trend Academic, Vice President of Technology for Mongoose Metrics, and CIO of Quincy University. Dr. Michaels has been a consultant or board member on the Commission on the Franciscan Intellectual Tradition since 2003. And so I invite Dr. Danny Michaels.
I echo the sentiments of previous presenters. Thank you for coming back. And thank you to the Franciscan School for inviting me. This is a bit of a homecoming. I see so many friars and people from my past. It's really a delight to be among you. And you might be wondering, how is it that a historical theologian is like the CIO and the CTO and all that kind of stuff? This is going to be a little autobiographical at the beginning, anyway. So my father worked at NASA, and I grew up around massive wind tunnels and rocket propulsion engines, and what child doesn't have access to those kind of toys? I mean, really. My brother worked with him, eventually transferring to Cape Canaveral, where he worked on the launch pad, and where our family would make pilgrimages, because where else would you make a pilgrimage? Exposure to NASA even inspired one of my sisters to be a scientist, and she too worked with NASA, building curricula for secondary education STEM programs. If that wasn't enough, my brother was whoops, I didn't want to do that. We cheated there. You just saw a glimpse. I forgot I have two things going here. Another brother was a career military pilot, eventually in charge of the Army's fleet of Gulfstream jets. So you see, science, human ingenuity were woven into the fabric of my everyday life. So much so that I became a pilot myself. So it may come as no surprise that I wanted to be an astronaut growing up. And I had a degree in science long before I studied theology. So that's kind of how theology and technology collided. I never made it to outer space. Apparently, short people are only allowed to go there. That is, until I met the Franciscans. Now, I'm not talking about spacey Franciscans, although I've met a few of those. I'm talking about Franciscan space, the Franciscan universe. Now, you may not know this, but the Franciscans have had a space program for nearly 3 decades. And I've been fortunate enough to be one of their inaugural astronauts, sort of a test pilot. But instead of just orbiting the Earth, I mean, anyone could do that, right? They unlock the Franciscan universe using digital technology. My journey into these spaces has had a profound impact on my life, my research, and the trajectory of my career, and has also on many people in this room. My experience with Franciscan digital resources is similar to something that NASA astronauts experience when they see space for the first time. It's known as the overview effect. This clip, taken from Apollo 8 in 1968, it was the first crewed spacecraft to leave low Earth orbit and the first human spaceflight to reach the moon. This was our first view of Earth from that vantage point, and it sort of changed everything. The astronauts gazed at Earth from 239,000 miles away, and they were traveling nearly 25,000 miles an hour when they experienced this effect. The most prominent common aspects of the overview effect are appreciation and perception of beauty, unexpected and even overwhelming emotion, and an increased sense of connection to other people and the Earth as a whole. Does this sound familiar? Subliminal Laudato Si? So, without defining it as such, Pope Francis evokes the overview effect in Laudato Si. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. If we feel intimately united with all that exists, then sobriety and care will well up spontaneously. Then he uses ecology and other things to help us see creation from this new perspective. I'm going to share 4 overview effects. Oop, I went the wrong direction. This is really hard because I can't see my presentation. There we go. I'm going to share 4 overview effects, 4 times that we reimagined the Franciscan tradition, and each time we redefined the church. And when I say we, I mean the Franciscans. I encountered the first Franciscan overview effect in the 1990s with the publication of Francis of Assisi early documents. Along with a handful of others, some of whom are in this room, I was invited to use new indexing software to create the index for the series. We methodically combed through tens of thousands of words. Much of it was done on the banks of the Mississippi in a hunting lodge while eating peanut butter and pickles on saltine crackers. That alone nearly caused an overview effect. There in that cabin, we were able to see what appeared to be the full breadth and depth of the tradition, analyzing and categorizing word by word. It was the first time in nearly 800 years that anyone could make these connections so quickly. It felt as if we were flying 25,000 miles an hour. And I'm looking at Wayne because he was there and Bill was doing this with us. Dozens of dissertations were born in those days. Although indexes are something we take for granted today, after all, what is Google but a massive index? This experience had a lasting impact on the tradition, and it was the first Franciscan overview effect, my first trip to space. The second overview effect also occurred in the 90s and 2000s. When the editors of Francis of Assisi early documents were toiling away with words, Marilyn Ehrenberg-Levin at Princeton was using software algorithms to analyze narrative art in Italy from the years 431 to 1600. She defined a narrative as any art that includes 3 or more panes in a story, such as you see being depicted here. Marilyn discovered that the disposition of these narratives, the order and relation of the panels, carries a meaning of its own. And she identified a series of patterns that repeated throughout history. I discovered these patterns throughout the Franciscan tradition, particularly in the Basilica of St. Francis, where I have been doing research on medieval biblical hermeneutics, Bonaventure, and the fresco cycles. You may recall that Bonaventure, in his Life of St. Francis, writes thematically rather than chronologically. And in so doing, he constructs a spiritual and historical cathedral, where all at once we experience Francis's life, conversion, and experience of Christ. We can read it diachronically, that is, following the order of Francis's life, or we can read it synchronically, is to read between the stories and the chapters and the pericopes. It's as if he wrote on a supersonic carousel, placing Christ in the center while letting all the other themes race around. It's really tough to unpack, at least in a 2-dimensional text. But now, suddenly, with the help of Levin's narrative cycles, we could see the story unfold in 3-dimensional space in the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi. Conceived as part of my doctoral research, I built a 3D model of the Basilica using gaming technology. It was one of the first of its kind in the world of digital humanities. The Center for Digital Theology at St. Louis University, which is now the Walter Ong Center for Digital Humanities, adopted the project and developed the amazing 3D model you see today. Users can touch frescoes to uncover metadata, or spin, or run, or jump, even fly through the basilica, doing things that you can't do in real life. And trust me, I've tried. With this technology, we were able to uncover relationships between the paintings that had been gone unnoticed for centuries. And with Levin's narrative art as a key, we realized that Bonaventure's Life of Francis could be depicted chronologically and thematically at the same time, thus shedding the limitations of 2D linear text. The third overview effect was the online HTML version of Francis of Assisi early documents and Clare of Assisi early documents, sponsored by the Commission on the Franciscan Intellectual and Spiritual Tradition. You've probably seen it. Most of you have been online because I see your IP addresses coming through whenever you join. CFIT commissioned an online tool so that anyone could index the sources from the comfort of their own home. Hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world have used this platform, particularly in developing nations where paper resources and libraries are scarce. In terms of raw organic search power, that is how it ranks in Google's algorithms, it's one of the most popular sites in the history of the Franciscan tradition. The sheer volume of traffic on this, there's probably 200,000 sessions a month, totaling 50,000 hours. Like, people don't just go to it, they spend time on it. The fourth overview effect, which is taking place as I speak, is a collaboration between the Commission on the Franciscan Intellectual Tradition and the Academy for American Franciscan History and the National Institute for Newman Studies. There was a few other things that I'm going to skip here. They are creating two new websites, one for CFIT and another for AAFH, both of which will replace the current iterations, one on aafh.org and the other on franciscantradition.org. Don't fret, you'll still be able to do all the same things and more. They are powered by cutting-edge technology that is faster, more secure, more integrated, better search, and more user-friendly than the current iteration. In other words, we're giving you all a helmet, you're going to get in the space shuttle, and you're going to go into the Franciscan universe, hopefully avoiding the spacey Franciscans. I'd like to focus, though, on their new digital collections, which both organizations will share. And there will be a lot of new documents that you haven't seen before, and which will soon replace the documents that are on franciscantradition.org. Specifically, they are adopting a groundbreaking digital humanities platform called Rednoll. Rednoll is an online archiving platform that provides unprecedented levels of uniform and rich access to high-resolution image-based archives, metadata, and transcriptions, including advanced search, data visualization, and dynamic content. It borrows some of the same technologies that power Facebook, Twitter, Google Earth, Google Maps, all engineered to help us see the Franciscan sources in new and imaginative ways. The pedagogy of the software embodies a cycle of discovery, and it will mirror your experience online. The first is the ability to create, to import, to edit, manage, delete media without advanced computer skills. This has been one of the biggest limitations in the tradition. We simply haven't been able to get the documents in. Now we'll have a capacity to do this on massive scale. To annotate, this is where we mark up the documents, encode them, link them, transcribe them, standardize them, format them, all the things that we couldn't do until now. The documents we have now are static HTML documents. We don't have information about the authors, the dates, the places, the important maps, all that sort of stuff will be available to us, similar to what you might see in a library, but on steroids. The next is to discover. Having massive amounts of data isn't much good if users can't find it. So advanced search will help us navigate. And finally, imagining. Digital collections should stimulate our imagination. And that is deep zoom, layers on layers, colorizing, flipping, rotating, comparing, sharing, importing, visualizing, seeing the unseen, and by that I mean seeing things that you can't see when you have the manuscript in front of you. I can look at this paper as much as I want with my eyes, but I am not going to be able to see beyond, into the grain of that paper unless I'm in this platform. Maybe you don't want to see the grain of that paper, trust me. Once again, we're going 25,000 miles an hour. Only this time, we're seeing deeper into the universe of Francis and Clare. Since we have not loaded all the Franciscan documents into the new system, the following examples are taken from the digital collections in my home at the National Institute for Newman Studies, where this software was developed. But it's not a stretch to see how these examples will be applied to the Franciscan tradition. We don't have time to cover everything, so I'm just going to show you a handful of things. The first one is deep zoom. Think Google Earth here. Unlimited zoom and unlimited pixels, and it supports 3D objects, just like Google Earth. You can zoom in on a manuscript, lock the zoom level, and switch between pages as often as you like. File size is no longer an issue. No image or text is too long or too large. Some of our manuscripts are a terabyte apiece, yet you can browse them as if they are kilobytes. Layers. Not only can we navigate a document like a book from one page to the next, but we can also stack an infinite number of images on top of one another. So you can have canvases horizontally and canvases vertically. It's like having whole stacks of books. Here we have the original score of Elgar's Dream of Gerontius. 2 images are stacked onto one canvas, one the original photograph, and the other taken with backlight to see underneath a patch that Elgar put on the page. This allows us to see exactly what he changed as he composed the dream. And if you hold this manuscript, which is about the size of this table, in front of you, you can't see that unless you're in this system. This is a classic example of seeing the unseen in ways that are not possible physically. With ultraviolet light, X-ray technology, multispectral imaging, and more, the possibilities are endless. Not just with text, but with art and more. So imagine we can have Francis of Assisi's early documents, but then the original manuscript. Or maybe we want to have the full stemma of a manuscript where we can see the alpha and the beta strains and how they came together. Or I used to have arguments with Bill Short in the past where my dream was we wouldn't have critical editions anymore. Some of these people are going to throw things at me. But we could actually read the strain that we want to see in real time. That's possible with this type of software. Non-destructive image manipulation. Here we have a manuscript in which the author decided to save paper by turning the manuscript on its edge and writing in the other direction. This was either a cruel joke or it was much more legible when it was first written. Fortunately, we have image editing tools that allow them to rotate and colorize and desaturate and subtract, make black or white or invert. And editing images with these tools as a user is non-destructive. In other words, the image doesn't actually change. Rather, the mathematical algorithms behind them on the servers change in real time, giving users a virtual playground to tweak for their own purposes. In this case, we're tweaking so that we can read the text in the other direction. Comparing documents. One of the most powerful tools is the ability to compare things. Users are able to open an infinite number of documents side by side or in any configuration on the screen, as many as they can fit. Search filters are built into each document so that you can find exactly what you need for comparison. And once loaded, you can enjoy image editing tools from inside each individual document. Now we can compare the volumes on Francis and Clare with the original manuscripts, or load artwork, or anything, any type of media side by side. When comparing thousands of Newman letters, our curators discovered a wide range of writing styles. Characters in one letter are totally different from the characters he used in another. Sometimes it's as if multiple people were writing as Newman. But after comparing enough of them, we realized that they were all him. And after transcribing the letters, we started to see the writing patterns were related to his mood. Now we can predict when he was angry or sad or aging or young. We are even investigating artificial intelligence algorithms that we're testing right now that will help us dig deeper, and we can predictively do searches on documents when we know he wasn't quite so happy. Data visualization. With so much data at our fingertips, we have tools to visualize the data. This is a sunburst depicting 5 major themes in Newman's writing. Click on any one theme, and it drills down to the authors, dates, and finally titles of works related to that theme. Click an item, and it opens that item and performs a search term for you. This one is Newman's journey to Rome, and we could visualize any of Francis's journeys, or maybe we just want to show where the manuscripts reside. We can also perform advanced searches, where in this case, we're typing in Catholic University, and we can choose exact word or all words or exact phrase, or you can filter by author or contributor or subject or call number, any number of ways. When you look at the results, you can modify your search terms and search the document once you're inside the document. So because there's so much data, now we have these extra tools that we can dig deep into the Franciscan tradition to find what we need. We can also have full transcriptions of documents, whether that be published books or handwritten manuscripts like this, so you can cut and paste into your text. And you can save those things into your own profile and share them with your students, or share them with your friends, or post them to social media, or book them for future reference while you're doing your research. So, in conclusion, the new digital collections will transport us to a whole new region of the Franciscan universe. We are going beyond infinity, or at least what we thought was infinity. We are reimagining the church through the eyes of the poor Francis, revealed through more data and greater accessibility. Propelled by a cycle of creating, annotating, discovering, and imagining, we are experiencing yet another overview effect. Whereas previous overview effects took us to the Franciscan moon, this iteration has the potential to get us closer to the sun, S-O-N. Sobriety and care for the tradition will well up spontaneously. Although we have only seen a handful of features, it's apparent that being a Franciscan astronaut requires some training. Astronauts like me have spent decades preparing for space, and we need guidance from people on Earth, such as you see here depicted at Houston Control. I had mentors like Wayne Hellman and Bill Short and Regis Armstrong and Margaret Carney and many others, and others will need help too. Fortunately, the Franciscan School of Theology provides guidance for our journey, and I do get paid for that click. Dr. Prides will help us unpack how FST has some new ways that we can be grounded in this tradition. Thank you.